So for those that aren't already familiar with you, do you mind starting us off by just explaining a little bit about your background and how that led into working with cannabis in medicine? And then we'll just kind of spin off from there.
All right. Well, about 1,000 years ago,
Right. Yeah.
I feel like it's so long. I was a patient actually before I even became a physician, a medical doctor. I was diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis when I was a teenager, and it's a big fancy name. It's also called AS for short. And basically what it is an autoimmune disease of the spine. It's an inflammatory disorder. There's no cure. There's really, no treatment that is long term. It's really just maintenance and palliative care. And what ends up happening is your vertebrae, so the bones in your spine, start to fuse together. They literally crazy glue together, and you lose mobility.
Yeah.
So you might see people on the street where they look like they have a big rod in their back, and they're sort of turning, with their whole body. They don't have much range of motion.
Right.
And usually those are patients with AS. And I went through conventional treatment as a teenager and as a kid. I had a lot of pain, but I did, normal prescription medications. I went to physical therapy for many, many years, did acupuncture, epidurals. I did a lot of injections and trigger point injections, but nothing gave me long-lasting relief. So I wore a back brace while I was in medical school, and this was in San Francisco. I went to school shortly after they legalized cannabis in San Francisco, in California. And I would wear this back brace all the time while I was doing rounds. And one of my attendings pulled me aside and said, what's going on? Why are you wearing this brace? You're having a hard time standing, assisting in the OR, delivering babies. I see that you're sort of standing on the side, trying to sit down, and you're in a lot of pain. I told them I had AS and that I was really disheartened. I was really sad because here I was training to be a doctor. I had at my disposal, hundreds of specialists. I was in this great university, and no one could really offer me any relief. It was sort of the same revolving door. Here's another prescription. Have you tried an epidural? Have you tried steroids? Yes. And there's a lot of meds that I couldn't take. When you're working in the hospital or you're studying, you can't be sedated. You can't be altered in any way. So surprisingly, he pulled me aside, and this was an HIV and AIDS doctor, and he handed me this bottle. Okay, and he said, don't tell anyone I'm giving you this. Don't freak out. But this is marijuana. This is marijuana that's in a tincture bottle, and it helps my HIV and AIDS patients with pain. He didn't call it CBD oil or anything fancy like that. He just said it's marijuana, steeped in alcohol. Take it before you go to bed at night. But it really helps my HIV and AIDS patients. And I completely freaked out. I grew up in the Bronx, and I grew up in a very traditional Chinese household. So there was a stigma surrounding cannabis. I was a pre-med. I had my eye on the prize. I didn't really experiment with cannabis a lot, but I knew, and he said it too. He said, you're going to work 80 to 100 hours a week, and you have a long way to go. And you really are not going to make it, with just this back brace. So I sat with it on my dresser for weeks on end, and I stare at it, and I finally took it. I took it over the weekend when I wasn't on call, and to my surprise, it did make me feel a little funky. It reminded me of when I first had a glass of wine. I got a little flushed, but nothing crazy. But, by the time the weekend was over, by Monday morning, I knew something was working because I was able to stand and do the dishes without the back brace. I was able to do some light household chores without, pain. And I went up to him that next week and I said, what is in this? I said, what is this? And how come more patients don't know about it? And he started explaining, cannabis to me and what it is, what it isn't. He basically took me aside and he says, there's this journal club that meets, there's other MDs. If you want to start learning about this plant, let's, by all means, let's start looking at these different cases. And I made it a point for my career to learn everything I could about this plant medicine, and this was, in the 2000s. So, a lot has changed since then. But patients found me. I didn't have to advertise. I integrated into my holistic family practice, and word spread fast because patients could appreciate the fact that they could tell me about cannabis usage, tell me about their other medication usage without feeling like the doctor was going to dismiss them from their
Right.
practice.
Yeah.